Welcome to Godly Play at Clayton Valley Presbyterian Church. I'm Kathleen Krentz, and I'm glad you're here to share story with us today in our program of spiritual formation that's founded on the sacred stories found in the Word. We offer Godly Play each Sunday for children generally who are of age 3 or older, but we welcome anyone who's young at heart and wants to explore God's Word in this way. We come to the room typically from the sanctuary when we're meeting in person. A teacher will greet each person at the door and welcome them by name, one by one, to the circle where we find the best place for us to hear the story. If we were all together here, we'd sit together and look at one another, and we always start the same way. The Lord be with you. Then it's time to go over to the circle of the church year. This is our calendar, even though it doesn't look like calendars that we have in the office or at home. The circle of the church year has a beginning that's an ending, but that ending is also a beginning. And so we find where we are on this particular Sunday in the church year. And here we are, we're kind of winding down in the green, ordinary time. Not too very many Sundays left in this season of the church year before we change colors. Then we come back to the circle, and we have to get ready. We make our bodies still and our hands still, our mouths still, because each one of us will find something different in the story today. Now, every box, every basket, every tray in this room is a story. We have parables, we have the stories of how we worship together that are right behind me. And along the walls we have the sacred stories from both the Hebrew scriptures, the Old Testament, and the Greek scriptures, the New Testament. It's important to watch where the storyteller goes to get the story, because once you've heard a story in this room, it's yours forever. And during the work time, you can take a story down and work with it on your own. I'm going to go over to the shelves of the Hebrew scriptures, because this Sunday we're continuing the story of the great family. You might remember that story. I just need this basket. Listen for what's important for you today. This is the story of Hagar, who was from the land of Pharaoh, from Egypt. Hagar was a slave. She lived in the home, a tent, with Abraham and Sarah. Sometimes you'll hear Hagar referred to as a servant, but she was a slave. She had to get up when Sarah told her. She had to do the work that Sarah told her to do. She could speak when Sarah allowed her, for she was Sarah's slave. She was much younger than Abraham and Sarah and did a lot for them. Now, Abraham and Sarah had always wanted to have a family, but they were growing past the time when Sarah thought that she could have a child. And so it was the custom in that day for men to have more than one wife. And Sarah told Abraham that he should take her slave Hagar as his wife. She should have a child that would be theirs. And since Hagar was a slave, she had to do what Sarah told her. So Hagar became Abraham's wife, and not very long afterwards, they found that she would have a child. Hagar grew proud of this child growing in her belly. And that made Sarah furious. She did not like the way Hagar was behaving, looking at her with pride that she was the one to have this child. And so Sarah went to Abraham and told him that he should send Hagar away. But Abraham said, "No, Hagar is your slave. You should do what you think." Sarah began to be mean to Hagar. She was unkind. And Hagar despaired. She ran away. She went out into the desert. She couldn't bear it. She found some shade, and as she sat there trying to think about where she would go and what she would do, how she might get back to Egypt, God came so close to Hagar, and Hagar came so close to God that she knew that the voice she heard was a messenger from God. And the messenger said what messengers from God so often say, "Don't be afraid." The messenger said, "Don't despair, Hagar. You must go back, but don't despair. You will have a child, you will have a son, and you shall call him Ishmael." In their language, it means God sees you. And Ishmael will become the father of a great family. Hagar was so overcome. From then on, she called God in her language, "the one who sees me." For God had seen a slave girl in her darkest moment. And so she obeyed. She went back. Hagar did have a son. And she followed what the messenger of God had told her. And she named that boy Ishmael. For 14 years, Ishmael was Abraham's firstborn child and only son. And as he grew, Sarah found herself resenting that baby, that child, that boy. And then, when she was far too old, she thought to have a child herself. Sarah, too, had a child. Sarah and Abraham named their baby Isaac. In their language, that means laughter. For they laughed when they thought they could have a child. When Isaac had grown just a little bit. I guess we'd say he was a young boy. There was a big family feast to celebrate them. But Sarah could see that Ishmael, the older, the firstborn child, he was loved by Abraham. She felt perhaps Abraham loved Ishmael more. And she was angry all over again. She went to Abraham again and said, "You must send her away, for Isaac must be the one who creates the great family." And so Abraham filled a skin with water and found bread. And he sent Hagar and her son, a teenager by that point, Ishmael, out into the wilderness alone. Hagar and Ishmael wandered in the desert, in the wilderness, until their water and their food ran out. Hagar found some shade and told Ishmael to sit there. And she began to walk away. For she said to herself that she could not bear to watch her son die. She wept, for her heart was breaking, and Ishmael wept too. And once again, God came so close to Hagar, and Hagar came so close to God. The messenger came to her again and said, "Hagar, don't despair. Stop your crying. You shall live, and Ishmael shall live. Ishmael will become the father of a great nation, and his people will be more plentiful than the grains of sand in the desert or all the stars in the sky. Take heart." And as the voice disappeared, Hagar's eyes were opened, and she saw a well of water that she had not seen before. She filled the skin with water. Ishmael drank, and she drank, for they were so thirsty, and they had the strength to go on. Ishmael grew up in the desert. He became a great hunter with bow and arrow. He had children. Hagar was a grandmother. And those children had children, and those children had children. Until they were as many as all the grains of sand in the desert or the stars in the sky. Ishmael's people became the people we know of the deserts, the Arab people. A great family. Now, I wonder what part of Hagar's story you like the best. I wonder if there's a part of Hagar's story that might be about you or touch you in a special way. I wonder if there's something about Hagar's story that surprises you, that makes you wonder more. I wonder what part of Hagar's story you think is the most important for everyone, perhaps the most important for you. The woman who named God the one who sees me, and her boy, God hears you, Ishmael. And this other great family, as numerous as the stars. Now, during our work time, some of you always like the story. You always pick today's story for your work. You know who you are. Charlie, you're almost always one of them. And when we work with the story, it's really how it becomes our own. When we tell it for ourselves, that's how we know it. Of course, some of you like to get other stories off the shelves. I know Savannah really likes the baptism story. And some of you like to go to the craft shelves and you take down pens or clay. You might take the felt or the beads. When we work with the story materials or we work with the art and craft materials to make the story our own, it's really how it becomes part of us forever. So I hope that you will make a time to work with this story, whether you read more about it or those of you who like to draw or paint, you can work with it. And of course, when you come back to this room, you can take it down from the shelf to work with it. When we're finished with the work time, sometimes we need a reminder. So sometimes the storyteller will remind us it's time to come back. For it's time for our feast. A time when we have a chance to pray and remember. We use the holding cross, our prayer cross. It's just a nice feel. It fits our hand really nicely. And it helps us as we share and take turns around the circle, for each person has their own prayer and their own time. So we're very still and quiet during that time. No one can make you pray. But if you have a prayer, you can say it out loud. Sometimes we like to pray so that only God hears our words. And sometimes prayers have no words at all, but God knows. And so we pass it one by one around the circle and take time until it comes back to the storyteller. And we lift all those prayers up, the prayers of the people of this circle. And we pray together aloud the prayer that Jesus taught us a long time ago, but is still teaching us every time we say it. Our Father, who is in heaven, holy is your name. And then it's time for our feast. We always have servers, people who put their work away and bring around the napkins and the bread and the cup. We serve each other. For this feast is one where we remember when Jesus came together with his friends in the upper room. That Last Supper that last meal together before he was taken. When everyone had eaten their fill and had enough to drink, Jesus took the bread and blessed it and broke it. He said, "Take and eat this, all of this, and remember me until I'm with you again." You know, he was always saying things like that, things that they didn't understand. But later, of course, they would remember what he'd said, and they would never forget, and so we don't. And then he took the cup, and he blessed that also. And he invited them all to drink of it. Drink all of it. For this is my promise to you, that when you come together in my name, I will be with you. They may have had wine at their meal. Some people have juice. We like to have water in this room because it reminds us of the waters of creation, the water that is all water, and the water that the people went through to freedom. We remember the water of Jesus' baptism. So we have the cup and we have the water and we have matzah. We don't have the big puffy bread. We like to use matzah here because it reminds us of when the people went into the desert. They had to hurry to get away from Pharaoh. They didn't have time for that bread to rise. They barely had time to bake some to take with them. And so we have this taste of the desert with us for our feast as we share it together. So at home, or wherever you may be, whether you're on your own or with your family, I hope you have a little bread or a cracker or maybe some matzah. I hope you have a cup, water or juice. And when you take that, you remember that time when Jesus promised to be with us. For when we are at this circle, either on camera, virtually, or someday when we come together again, may the Lord bless and keep you always. Stay safe. Wear a mask. 6-foot distance until we come together.